So the civil case against Dak Prescott has been dismissed, and it's possible that his accuser and her attorneys will be facing sanctions. Now, I've done some deep dives into this case. I'll link to these videos in the description, and I luckily, very gratefully, had Pam Entertainment TV join me. So if you want to take a look back and do a deep dive on how we got here, I'll link to these two videos in the description. But we're going to do a bullet point roundup here of the timeline of everything that happened since January of this year. And what I think is really interesting about this case is the news coverage of the case being dismissed actually is louder than the initial coverage, which is kind of unusual. It's usually the reverse. The accusation's really loud, and then if it ends up being dismissed or it's incorrect, you don't really hear about that quite as loudly. Really where this all started was on January 16th of 2024 when Bethel and Joel Zahe sent this letter on behalf of Victoria Shores to Dak Prescott. And this letter related to an alleged SA committed by Dak Prescott on February 2nd, 2017. Very interestingly, in this letter, we have this paragraph here, that despite the tragic events, she is willing to forgo pursuing criminal charges, along with disclosing this information to the public, in exchange for compensating her for the mental anguish she has suffered. Ms. Shore's damages are valued at the sum of $100 million. You have until February 16th, 2024 to respond to this demand letter. So to discuss this matter, please contact us, the attorneys. Now, after receiving this letter, Dak Prescott hires some attorneys and they have some communications with Beth and Joel from this law firm. And then on March 11th, Dak Prescott files a petition against Victoria Bailey Shores, Bethel Zahe, and Joel Zahe, so the accuser and her attorneys. They tell the court that this case arises out of a blatant attempt by Victoria Shores and her legal team to extort plaintiff Dak Prescott by weaponizing patently false yet heinous SA allegations with no basis in reality. And they cite that sentence that we just read from the letter, asking for the $100 million and what will cause them to ask for it and why. In bold, they emphasize that Mr. Prescott has never engaged in non-consensual sexual behavior with anybody. And we also find out that Dak Prescott has filed a complaint with the police department for this extortion. And perhaps most interestingly for what we're going to look at for the rest of this timeline is here, where after receiving the aforementioned correspondence, counsel for Mr. Prescott reached out to confer with defendant Shore's counsel to confer on the matter. Surely she would not so blatantly attempt to extort a highly successful NFL quarterback at the height of his career. But defendants Bethel and Joel confirmed their motives when they confirmed on a phone call that all civil causes of action have expired. And the sole reason for their demand of $100 million from Mr. Prescott was to forego criminal charges and for not making the alleged assault public. So by March 12th, we have this petition from Dak Prescott, and he has filed a complaint with the Prosper Police Department to investigate the lawyers and Victoria Shores for extortion. And then on March 14th, Victoria Shores files a lawsuit in Dallas County against Dak Prescott, but not before giving an interview. And not before her attorneys also gave an interview. And though the petition is initially for SA, it will be amended to include defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, assault, and false imprisonment. But in listening to Victoria Shore's own interview given before she filed this suit and after Dak Prescott filed his, there are several contradictions, especially on this false imprisonment part.
Walking around him, he held my hand. So it's not like I could just run away or walk away. So I saw my friend, I said, come back with me and take me to get my car. So we got in the car, same setup pretty much. He led me to the back, the very back, and he was pretty intoxicated, so he actually fell asleep. And we went all the way back to his house. She followed us, and I told her to take me to my car.
And I'll link to this full interview if you want to go through it in full, but just that short snippet, she says that an incident happened in the back of an SUV. They go to another venue, they hang out for longer, they're walking around, he's holding her hand. And then she goes and tells her friend, like, hey, can you take me to get my car? But they end up going to Dak's house first. But her car was left at the initial venue where they all met. Her friend drives behind her. She gets back into the SUV where she alleges now, today, that everything happened. Rides with him in the car. And then because he's asleep, when she gets to his house, she ends up just saying, okay, well, guess I'll just go home, and gets in the car with her friend finally, and then goes to the venue where the parking lot is where her car is parked. And that was just one small thing that I noticed watching through that interview. Again, I'll link to that in the description. And at the same time, Victoria Shores is giving this interview where she's also asked, did you file a police complaint? No, not yet, but I'm going to. Her lawyers do an interview and they say the same thing. We haven't, but we're going to. And this is like March 13th. So Dak Prescott, March 11th, he does his filing, and we know he filed a police complaint already about the extortion letter. And then by March 13th, Victoria Shores and then the attorneys give their separate interviews. And then March 14th, we get their filing, their civil filing. And while the attorneys were being interviewed, they were asked what their reaction was to Dak's lawsuit.
In the universe yesterday.
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that both of us were flabbergasted. In our mind, we're saying you raped somebody and you want to file a lawsuit. When we read, the whole extortion narrative, we were really just mind blown because what we did was send a demand letter, which is very standard. We and other attorneys do it every single day for millions and millions of cases nationwide.
That we send demand letters every day for millions of cases.
But what they're trying to do is they want to take over the narrative. They wanted to beat us to the punch and try to make this about something else that it's not. We want the narrative to reflect what this is, which is...
We want the narrative.
Dak Prescott raped somebody. So what they're trying to do, Dak and his attorney, Levi McCatherine, is they're basically the ones who are now trying to commit extortion. They're trying to send a message that, hey, we're Goliath, and if you don't put this thing away, X, Y, Z is going to happen. One of the things that Levi filed was tortious interference with an existing contract.
It's tortious. It's tortious, not torturous.
Absolutely nothing to do with anything that this case is, but he's trying to use intimidation.
Now, keep in mind that this was happening back, this letter was sent in January. It was given a February deadline. And these petitions are being filed mid-March. And this is all during Dak Prescott contract negotiations with the Cowboys. This was in the heat of all of that. So this demand letter said, we'll go public mid-February, February 16th, if you don't pay us $100 million. And the attorney's doing this interview on March 13th saying, well, this has nothing to do with that. Torturous interference. Well, tortious interference is intentional interference with contracts. So yes, while technically there isn't torturous interference happening, there is tortious interference, I would say, likely happening here.
Intimidation tactics.
Do you think he's not just trying to scare her, but also the two of you?
He's trying to, yes, all three of us. And I wouldn't be surprised. I can't say this as a fact, certainty, but I wouldn't be surprised if the people who have been sending us messages are not at their discretion, or direction, excuse me. So.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an intimidation factor, trying to use old common practice of victim shaming and victim blaming. Let me get the attention off of me. But we're not afraid of Mr. Prescott or his legal team at all. We're ready to fight back, and we are going to fight back.
And am I right that he didn't just sue Victoria, but he sued the two of you as well?
Yes, that is correct.
Which is very uncommon, which was very surprising to us. But once again, it's an intimidation tactic, a bully tactic, trying to scare us.
Yes, and
it's worth noting that, and it's deleted now, but Bethel on her Facebook had posted a post doubling down. She said something to the effect, and I don't remember the exact words. If you guys really want it, I can pull up a screenshot and put it in a short or something. It's in one of the old videos I did. But she repeated that Victoria Shores was telling her truth. And not only that Dak was in fact the R word, but that there were multiple women coming forward. Which never happened.
According to Texas law, we don't even believe that lawsuit directed at us was even had any basis in law. There's a lot of law in Texas that says you cannot sue attorneys for what they do during the course of their work. So we'll address that. We'll address the lawsuit against our client, and we are not going to be bullied, as she said, which is what they're trying to do, is bully us.
We'll address the lawsuit against our client. You're named in that lawsuit as co-defendants.
We are definitely going to be pursuing criminal charges. I don't want to say too much, but what I can tell you
So again, they still have not filed a police report. They haven't even filed the civil one yet.
is that the criminal charges and the civil case we're pursuing both of them ongoing at the same time simultaneously. And so the way it would work is we would file a police report, they'll do their investigation, and depending on what comes from the investigation, the case will move forward from there.
They're doing all of this after saying what Levi McCathern and Dak Prescott are doing is a bullying and intimidation tactic. But now they're like, oh, they came for us, or they just came for our client. We're going to leave out that we're named as co-defendants. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. We're going to do it simultaneously. Even though we wrote a letter saying we're demanding $100 million, and if you don't pay up, we're going to go public because the window for us to file a complaint is gone. So what is it? You just accuse someone of doing something, but it sounds more consistent with what you're doing.
And so the plan is now at some point to have your client file a police report.
Absolutely.
And we are in the process of that.
Had she, at your direction or before she met you at all, had she filed a police report on this incident in the past?
So it's taken her a while to come out, both for the civil case, criminal case, just speaking out in general. It's something she's been dealing with for a long time, and it's not uncommon at all for sexual assault victims to take some time before they address the incident. And it's one of the most common tactics. The other party says, well, she never said anything about it for this amount of time. But now she's ready, and we're handling both civil, criminal, and also just speaking out against Dak in general to let people know who he really is.
And filing a police report, would that be through the Dallas Police Department?
Yes, that would be correct.
As far as civil, you talked about civil, my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, as far as a civil lawsuit, she's passed the statute of limitations.
So she's passed the statute of limitations for sexual assault, for civil, but there are other avenues that we do have available to address this incident, and we plan to do that very soon with a counterclaim.
One of the counterclaims you'll countersue Dak
Correct.
for his lawsuit.
Correct.
And that's something you're also in the process of, a
Absolutely.
civil countersuit.
Absolutely.
What else did I not ask the two of you that you would want to touch on?
I think we've basically covered most of it, but we just want to reiterate that about the narrative. We do not want this narrative to be us having to be on the defensive, and we're gonna fight this back no matter how much they try to bully us.
Levi,
They keep calling it a narrative. Now, they also interview Dak's team. And again, links to the full things in the description, but I'm going to skip to one of the attorneys, Jennifer Falk. She was a former prosecutor who handled SA cases for nearly 18 years. Here's what she has to say in her representation of Dak Prescott against these claims, this demand letter and everything that stemmed from it.
So you've done a lot of these types of cases where you were prosecuting sex offenders. When you look at this case, what do you think?
I mean, so I was a prosecutor and handled violent and sexually violent offenses for almost 18 years. And so I come into every case with kind of that lens of believe her, right? Because that is what we should be doing societally. But the moment that I was brought into this case and the moment that I read the demand letter, it gave me great concern. I recognize the courage that it takes for survivors to come forward, whether that's coming forward to a friend, a therapist, police, whoever it is, when they come forward. And these types of cases, so specifically an extortion attempt for $100 million on a high profile, high visibility, local kind of hero in our community, they truly do undermine all of the progress that we have made societally in that Believe Her movement.
What was it that gave you, well, obviously the $100 million, what was it that raised the red flags for you?
I mean, for me, really, it was just the blatant wording in the extortion letter. I recognize every victim's right and opportunity to have legal counsel, and they should, whether it is through a prosecutor, where they're not directly their lawyers, but still obviously advocating on their behalf, whether it's lawyers like us helping sexual assault survivors as they go through this trauma. The letter that Dak and we received says expressly, we will forego pursuit of criminal charges. We will forego publicity in exchange for such an extreme amount of money. That phrasing in and of itself pauses me immediately. It's been 7 years. And I recognize that survivors do not come forward immediately, but for her to come forward in this manner is what tells me, coupled with our client's vehement denial that he has ever committed any sort of not consensual or sexual assault, that really is what tells me that this is an extortion attempt. That is it.
And then so again, after this series of interviews, we're moving from Dak Prescott filing his petition on the 11th. These interviews being filmed and published on the 11th and the 12th. And then on the 14th, we have the civil suit finally filed by Victoria Shores and her team. On April 8th, Victoria Shores moved the court in Dallas County to let her, withdraw her case. They let her do it without prejudice, but she wanted to move the case over to Collin County, where Dak Prescott had filed his civil suit. The judge signed off on that on April 12th, and Joel Zahai, because I've been pronouncing it wrong, said that they were doing it for convenience to kind of bring the cases together. Then on May 3rd, we get the news that the Dallas Police Department won't charge Prescott with criminal charges. And this brings us up to yesterday, where we get the news that the judge has dismissed the counterclaim filed by Victoria Shores and her attorneys. And let's go through the docket, because there's some interesting stuff. So you've got plaintiff, Dak Prescott, his attorney, Levi McCathern, and then you've got 3 defendants. Victoria Shores, who's represented by Joel. You've got Bethel, who's represented by Monroe Solomon III. And then you've got Joel, who's representing himself. Now, if you look at the case events, we see some of this initial stuff back in April. The counterclaims are being filed. We see that the initial motions to dismiss filed on the 5th of April are in relation to Joel and Bethel as the named defendants. On April 16th, Victoria Shores responds to the initial petition, the initial complaint, and also files her counterclaim. This is where we have that consolidation, that transference from the other county. They closed that out and brought it over here. Then on April 29th, we have the defendant's joint anti-SLAPP motion to dismiss. And also on the 29th, Prescott responds to the counterclaims. Now, what's interesting is there was a hearing scheduled regarding the motion to dismiss, but they reset it on May 14th. And on the 15th, Dak Prescott filed a motion to dismiss the counterclaim. And not only that, but he also filed a motion for sanctions for frivolous pleadings. And we already know that this has been granted. The counterclaim has been dismissed. And that a hearing on September 13th has been scheduled for arguments about sanctions. Now, what I really love is when we heard in that interview when Joel was like, oh, there's all kinds of rules that protect attorneys. You can't just sue attorneys. What does Victoria Shores, what do her attorneys do in response on May 15th? Well, Defendant Shores responds to plaintiff's Rule 91A motion, anti-SLAPP motion, and motion for sanctions. And then what motion does Defendant Shores file against Dak? A Rule 13 motion for sanctions. Now, Rule 13 is a Texas rule that allows sanctions to be brought forth against an attorney or represented party or both on the grounds that they filed a pleading that is either in bad faith or is groundless and meant to harass. So attorneys are protected, but it seems like here in this motion, this Rule 13 motion, they might be going after Dak and his attorneys for bringing this initial petition forward. On the 16th, we have a notice of appearance for counsel for Bethel. So that's probably where Monroe Solomon comes into play. And then Victoria Shores amends her counterclaims. Now there's another hearing for a motion to dismiss, but it's canceled per attorney. And then just about 2 weeks later, we have a motion to withdraw from both Joel and Bethel, which I thought was kind of interesting because Joel was representing himself, but Bethel just tried to bring in an attorney to represent her, and now they're both trying to withdraw. But this was on the 24th, and what happens 2 days later? We have this motion to dismiss, and then the judge grants it, and also sets a hearing for September 13th for motion for sanctions to be heard, arguments relating to sanctions to be heard, 2 hours each side. So to me, you guys, this whole case is a hot mess. started with this demand letter back in January. Just a hot mess. And I can only laugh that we made it all the way till June 24th and suddenly have this motion to withdraw from the initial 2 attorneys. Which I'm not sure. I'm not seeing anything that's granted. I don't actually know. I don't actually know what the decision there was. But they're still wrapped up in it. They're still named as co-defendants for this sanctions hearing that's going to take place in September. So, but guys, that's how we're here now, where we actually have these stories talking about how he's cleared, the lawsuit's dismissed against Dak Prescott, but the sanctions could still be on their way for the co-defendants. And we'll close out with this statement from attorney Levi Catherine, where he says that despite Ms. Shores and her legal team's relentless efforts to extort money and damage Dak's reputation, justice has consistently prevailed and will continue to do so. The original lies by the accuser, her team, and their failed attempt to sue him civilly are all just a continuation of their extortion plot against Dak. These ploys distract from the trauma of legitimate sexual assault survivors and undermine the progress that our society has made in supporting them. We are proud that Dak stands up against this injustice and thankful Judge Tucker agrees. There's also this added context here that says the specifics of the decision aren't clear. Although the introductory paragraph to the press release containing McCatherine's statements explains that Judge Tucker found the claims, quote, lacked merit and should be dismissed immediately, it's very rare for a dismissal to happen this quickly without some specific legal flaw in the filing. In ruling on motions to dismiss filed at the outset of a case, the judge typically accepts the factual allegations as true, with the question being whether the law as applied to those allegations, even if 100% accurate, requires the case to be thrown out of court. So we should be getting this written decision to come down on Friday. Maybe we'll take a look at that. And really what we're going to be looking at is whether or not this lawsuit action, this counterclaim, would have revived the underlying incident from 2017. To bring it outside of the statute of limitations expiry window. So again, we'll have that written ruling on Friday. We'll see if we can take a look at that. And then on September 13th, Judge Tucker will take up the question of whether the accuser and or her lawyers should be sanctioned for making a frivolous claim. So what do you think about all that, you guys? Did you hear about this story when it first came out in the news in March? I did talk about it on this channel, but really it wasn't making news cycles the way that a typical celebrity being accused or having a lawsuit filed against them for SA of any kind really seems to make the headlines. And in a weird but agreeable balance, we're getting coverage that this was dismissed against him, which sometimes we don't see that in other cases either. You know, usually the initial story is huge, and then what the resolution of it, not so big. But with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to you guys. Let me know what you think, and links to some other stuff in the description for you guys. You guys all take care. Have a good one.